So the book, The Woman with a Worm in Her Head, and Other True Stories of Infectious Diseases, is, I just read the first chapter, and it basically it talks about a doctor who diagnoses a man with a worm inside him that he got somehow, and it kind of shows you the process of how she diagnoses him and all of that. So the beginning of the book, someone from Vietnam, some young lady from Vietnam is calling the doctor, and she answers and she talks about her husband, that they just came back from Vietnam, from vacation. They're in America now, but for some reason her husband, as soon as she came back, he felt sick, but then the next morning he felt like totally fine. But then he would always constantly coming home from work sick, and he would have like fevers. He would have hives and not things that are necessarily normal. He had 103 temperature, and so this would happen every day. And the doctor will look for it more, and she thought, okay, let's test for malaria. It came back negative. This malaria smear came back negative, but what happened was that there was way too much eosinophils, which inside the white cells inside the blood, right? From the white blood count was 26,000, and over half of the white cells were eosinophils, which are not normal. Eosinophils are sort of like they sort of hunt down any parasite that's inside your body, but due to the common times where everything is mostly sanitary and we don't really get parasites inside us very often, there's not really many of these, but more than half of the white blood count are made up of these eosinophils. That sort of shows us that there is something wrong. Basically, the body is producing more and more of these eosinophils because there is a parasite inside the body. And basically the doctor is trying to figure it out. And she's pretty sure it's a worm because, well, thinking about all of the other diagnoses it could be, it can't be malaria because it was negative. Any other common fevers, it wouldn't explain him getting better and then not getting better. And then thought for typhoid, but then his wife gave him antibiotics, but they did nothing, and the antibiotics should have done something if he had typhoid, so she was almost certain it was a worm. And then later she traces off into how she was so interested in worms. It was because when she was younger, the doctor, she said that she went to this camp, and first time she ever had anything to do with worms is that she was one of the campers that was hunting for worms to get a fish, and she didn't care. She doesn't remember if she had a fish or not, but that was the main thing that hooked on. And so when she was older, she had nothing to do with worms at all. But eventually, her career would loop back to worms, and she would be studying tapeworms and things like that. So then it comes back to present, and she's asking the husband of the wife step by step through their vacation. So they say they went to the capital, and what she's really thinking is where could the man meet the tapeworm or whatever worm that got inside him, which usually could be from going into infected waters that the worms could go inside, or if he ate raw food. Mm-hmm. And so thinking most of the food that they ate was mostly cooked, mm-hmm. So it was not from the capital. But then they went swimming, but then apparently wasn't infected, and even if it was, there was a small chance that he would get a worm there. But then before he left, there was sort of this parting tradition where they got a cobra and they cooked everything except the gallbladder and the heart, and and so he had to eat the gallbladder and the heart, and so this was kind of a trigger to know, okay, that's where the tapeworm came from.
Because it was not cooked.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was sort of like a dare because apparently his brother did it before leaving as well because he came to visit Vietnam. So, then she's going through, okay, what can it be, right? And eventually she gets to two kinds of worms, Spirometra, a tapeworm, or Gnathostoma, Gnathostoma, a roundworm. And she was saying the first one, the Spirometra, the tapeworm, it couldn't be that one because it causes a bizarre eye disease, and he would have gotten it by now because right now this is like 3 weeks later after he came back from Vietnam, and it should have already happened. Basically, what the worm does, it eats some. It goes around the muscle near your eye, and it's it didn't really go into too much detail, but like basically, he would not have it because then he would get the eye disease, but then trying to look for the mastoma, which is slightly different, which does it would most likely, if it got ingested, it would try to come back up because if it was inside a cat or a dog, it would try laying and developing inside the stomach, but since it wasn't a cat or dog, not a normal host for it, it was trying to go straight. It was going around everywhere it could because it had no clue where to actually develop or anywhere. And so what they most likely thought was that it was going straight up, and it was going towards the liver because the man had some pain in the liver, had some fever. So this sort of worked, and so they gave them specific medication, or albendazole. Albendazole. Yeah, albendazole.
Yeah.
So it was sort of a new worm medicine, and so they gave it to him, and eventually he became better. He wouldn't get sick, but then eventually he would get like this bulb right here, or around his left side, towards the chest, and he said there was a bulb like the size of an egg coming out. And apparently that was just the worm trying to get out. And they were saying, you know what we can do? We can cut it open, like just a small minor surgery, and just pull it out. And eventually they did. They got a quote-unquote 2 centimeter long, very firm, non-mobile, cord-like piece of tissue out of Han's abdominal wall. So eventually they got it out. They put it in a jar and they looked through it. And then they were looking through an MRI, and it turns out that it wasn't, the thing that they pulled out was, it wasn't even the worm. It was just some piece of tissue, and they cut him open for nothing.
That was the skin of the worm, no?
No, well, it didn't really specify, but it was some piece of tissue.
Okay.
But, they said she was thinking back, she's like, oh, wait a second, because the person sort of winged it because she's not dealt with this kind of worm before. But her diagnosis was correct. So eventually what happened was the worm just disappeared. So this is the medication. So most likely it just dissolved, or it's dead because of the medication that was given. Right? The only time, though, she said that you would have to cut open is if the worm went into a dead end, such as like a fingertip.
Okay. And
then it would break out if you didn't do anything about it. So that would be the only time you would have to cut open the finger, for example.
Okay.
But yeah, and she was saying that be careful next time, you don't want to eat anything raw.
So sushi?
I mean...
Sushi is raw, no?
Yeah.
Indeed.
Okay, so you like this?
Yeah,
that looks interesting to me. Huh?
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I want to ask you, what did you learn? What the idea you learned, really? The thing you learned the most, and you like the most from it?
Don't eat raw meat.
Oh, okay, that's what you learned. Okay, that's good. That's good. Okay, thank you.